As we mentioned, Kyle McCord, this is really his first time leading the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's on the road. Take me back to your first game in the game, JP. What was that experience like, and what advice would you give to Kyle McCord?
Yeah, I played in this game as a freshman, and I was mostly a special teams guy, but I did get a couple of reps on defense, and those reps I was losing my mind. I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is the pinnacle of college football. Made a couple of plays, so you settle in by doing that first. My first time on the road was that 2013 game. The reason I was nervous for that game is because I knew we had a fraudulent defense. We were not good on that side of the football. And I felt like if somebody had the opportunity to scheme us, we would give up a lot of points and a lot of yards, which is something that we did. So I think the confidence needs to build from within for Kyle McCord. And I think that he can have some of that confidence from going on the road against Notre Dame and getting that win. And he made some mistakes in that game, no doubt. But the idea that they were able to pull out that win gives him a confidence. Playing against Penn State, even though that was a home game, that was the biggest test of the year. And it wasn't a super explosive offensive performance, but he made the plays he needed to make. And he also realized that he's got a really good defense. It's not giving up a ton. And so for Kyle McCord, I think this is as much about the cast that he has around him and the experiences that he's been through this year more than it is about this game in and of itself and how he needs to impact it.
I think you're spot on. You know, if I can go back to my own experience, like I've said this, like it was literally like a spiritual psychedelic experience. I remember in that tunnel 2013, you know, I'm 18 years old, and we go out of our locker room, and there's Jeff Hireman and a bunch of Ohio State Buckeyes, and everyone starts barking, and it almost was a fight. I remember my pupils almost being dilated, like my vision was so high, my senses were so high. There was this show on like Discovery Channel, I think it was called like Superhuman, where they talk about people in ultimate fight or flight modes. Like they bench press a car off of them because they're so juiced up, right? That's what I felt like in this game. You hinted at it, just the extra fire. My advice for Kyle McCord is similar to your thought process, where, like, listen, there's emotion going on in this game. Is it nervousness or is it excitement? But if you could just look at it as emotion, emotional energy. The key for McCord is that it needs to start now, and it needs to start all season. He needs to go into Ann Arbor and wake up that Saturday morning with absolute and utter belief in himself that he is the guy to get this job done. You cannot have a seed of doubt running through the blood in your body, or you're screwed. For McCord, he needs to know that Ryan Day is going to put him in position, that he's got all the weapons around him. You cannot blink in the biggest moments. You got the talent to do it, but the nervousness could be the worst thing to work against you this weekend.
You know, you've talked about this before too, but when we were playing, I think you have said that the difference between our teams is that Ohio State always believed. Like we always felt like we were going to win regardless of what the situation was. And the program that you were in at the time you were there, that belief wasn't as convicted. So for Kyle McCord, he's got to get back there. But the momentum's on the other side for that. Michigan is the team with the belief right now. Kyle has to get that reinstilled, but we know he's going to play a big factor in this game. There are also some really key matchups that we're looking out for too. Wonderful players that are trying to cement their legacies through a victory here. What is the biggest matchup when you start to boil it down?
To me, I really think, you know, this game is going to be won and lost in the trenches. And off of that, with both quarterbacks, what helps them is the run game. The run game is the reason Michigan won in 2021 and 22. It's the reason they've turned this thing around. So the key matchups are in the two running back rooms, whether it's Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Blake Corum, of course, healthy. Really hasn't played in this game. Part of the reason he came back was to play in this game. Travion Henderson, healthy, did not play in the game last year. Both of these running back rooms are such an integral part of the offense. I'd imagine that the winner of this game, we're going to look back Saturday afternoon and say, whichever team was able to run the ball more efficiently and better in the big moments, that's going to be the team that wins the game, JP.
I like that, and I think that everybody's trying to write narratives here too from the running back room, where Travion Henderson, everybody said he lost his step, and for Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, it hasn't been the same performance that we saw from them last year. So I think for all the running backs in this, they're trying to make sure that people know who they are. I'm looking toward the outside, which I think is going to be a really key matchup here. Marvin Harrison Jr., we've talked about him numerous times on this program and how good that he is. He needs to be a big feature here to help his quarterback in Kyle McCord. But he's going to have a lot of resistance in his matchup with Will Johnson, who I think is one of the best cornerbacks nationally, who doesn't get talked about his play like that. And for me, I go back to last year's matchup. I'd probably go out on a limb and say that Will Johnson got the better of Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a year better now. I think that his releases are better. We were talking about this before the show. I don't think they're great. He catches a lot of contested footballs. And for Will Johnson, I think that this is going to be the #1 challenge for him all year. He hasn't seen a player like it, and he's going to have to come out early and win some of those battles. But this is going to be the one to watch for me in terms of a game within the game.
What I like about your answer is what I like about this game is what makes it the greatest rivalry in sports is like this is a look into I don't want to call it, Jerry Rice versus Deion Sanders. I don't want to call it that, right? Those guys, that's in a category of its own.
Would you call it David Boston versus Charles Woodson?
Could it be?
I mean,
could it be? Seriously, that's what it could be in time when these guys have long NFL careers. What are we going to look back and say? Like, that's the potential. I'll be interested. I mean, I don't know if you have Will Johnson follow Marvin Harrison Jr. all game, but you may do that more this week than you do versus any other opponent. Of course, he's 1 of 1. So I think for a young cornerback, too, here's the key is for Will Johnson. He's going to have safety help over top. So the key for him, and this as a defensive guy, knowing where your help is and when to take your chances. Because one thing that's going to be, we know for certain, is McCord's going to throw it 18's way. Will Johnson has to know when it's his time to try to undercut and maybe pick a ball off, or when to pass that route onto the safety and just play underneath coverage.
Yeah, it's going to be big. Like, I think everybody's going to have to be on top of their game, and playing against a savvy wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., too, you really have to know when to take those chances. I want to talk on the lines of scrimmage here real quick, too, because I think that there have been things that have been exposed as we get later on into the year. We know that Ohio State is not great at the line of scrimmage, right? That's their biggest weakness coming into this year. It's something that they've struggled with. I believe that Michigan has guys on the interior that can certainly cause trouble. But when I look at the tackles for Ohio State, I think that the left tackle in Josh Simmons has gotten better. Fryer, I'm not exactly sure about him, but I don't fear the Michigan edges as guys who can win one-on-one. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that assessment?
I wouldn't fear them, but what helps those edges is the blitz packages from Jesse. Here's one thing we know for sure.
Crazy.
Sainristil's coming off that nickel at some point, right?
Yeah.
So then it's on the edges are then that edge is going to going to the inside of the B gap. And the edge then becomes Mikey Sainristil off the edge.
Yep.
So that plays into this the tackle as well. And gosh, man, McCord's stats on the road, right, on the season this year is 8 touchdowns and 4 interceptions on the road. Really, we could be looking at 5 if Notre Dame capitalized when they had the rat safety undercut his throw. So pressure is going to be a big thing for McCord this weekend and the O-line as a whole. Can they keep the pocket clean? Here's one more matchup. Let's talk about an X factor, JP, because one play that comes to my mind last year is when C.J. Stroud drops back and he floats one to the end zone. Cade Stover was wide open, but that ball just hung in the air just a second too long, and Mikey Sainristil comes and bats it out. There will be an X factor in this game. Who is that player that you're keeping your eyes on?
It's Sonny Styles for me. And OSU secondary is banged up. Lathan Ransom probably not expected to play in this one. So he's going to have to do more moving around than initially anticipated. This is a player who can play in the box. He is a player who can play as an overhang off the edge. He's great in blitzing, and he can play in the middle of the field. And I think for Ohio State, as much as they can move him around and create the matchups that they want for their defense, for him to be able to have success, I think it's going to be big. It's putting a lot on his plate, and he's still a young player. But I think the reason why, as a guy who grew up in Columbus, that he came to Ohio State was to have that opportunity. So I want to see what it looks like on Saturday.
Well, that leads me into my X factor. I'm going to pick Colston Loveland, and I think it's a perfect lead-in because Ohio State played Minnesota last week. I was on the call. Minnesota has a great tight end in Brevin Spanford. I said, who's going to match up with them? Well, they said Sonny Styles. So they basically told me in that moment it's going to be Sonny Styles on Colston Loveland. Why the tight end matters is, as a true freshman, he made big-time plays in this game. He had a touchdown off of a double move. JJ has been a little bit shaky at times. And a tight end with a big catch radius and solid hands, and Colston has proven that he's a guy that makes a lot of contested catches. JJ is going to be looking to Colston's way on critical third downs, need to sustain drives, and down in the red zone as well. So Colston Loveland, Sonny Styles. Man, there's so many good matchups we could talk about in this game. I can't wait for that.
A couple big conversions for Colston against Maryland last week. I think it was also the receiver he was trying to target when JJ threw that interception as well. So
yes,
he's going to have to be careful picking his chances with Colston, but you know how I feel about him. The next Jake Butt could be a Mackey Award winner by the time he leaves Ann Arbor. All right, time for our first